You have $15 million. Vanessa's fork hit the china plate so hard that everyone at the Thanksgiving table stopped moving. I looked across the roasted turkey, untouched stuffing, and half-filled wineglasses at my older sister. Her phone was clenched in one hand. Her face had gone from shocked to furious in seconds. Mom turned to me first. "Helen, is that true?" Not, "Vanessa, where did you get that?" Not, "Why are you digging into your sister's finances?" Just me. I set my napkin beside my plate. "My finances are private." Vanessa gave a sharp laugh. "Private? You've been sitting there pretending you're just doing well while I've spent an entire year telling you how hard things have been for me." Dad leaned back in his chair. "If you really have that kind of money, hiding it from your own family is pretty cold." There it was. 32 years old, and somehow I was 12 again, standing beside Vanessa while my parents explained why she needed more, deserved more, or had worked harder. Vanessa had always been the one they celebrated. Her tuition was an investment in her future. Her wedding deserved help because it was once in a lifetime. When she needed money, there was always a reason. When I needed something, I was told hardship would make me independent. Apparently, independence only counted until it became profitable. Vanessa pushed her chair back. "You watched me struggle when you could have fixed everything." That sentence stopped me. I studied her face. "Fixed what?" She hesitated. Mom glanced at Dad. And suddenly, the room felt very different. Vanessa pointed her phone toward me. "Don't play dumb, Helen. That commercial building alone is worth millions." My hand froze beside my glass. I had never told Vanessa about that building. Not once. I had spent years quietly buying small commercial properties, improving them, refinancing carefully, and rolling the gains forward. I never talked about it at family dinners because any achievement of mine somehow became a comparison with Vanessa. But that particular property, Vanessa shouldn't even have known its address. "Where did you hear about my building?" I asked. She folded her arms. "That isn't the point." "It's exactly the point." Dad sighed. "Helen, don't turn this into an interrogation." I looked from him to Mom, then back to Vanessa. Nobody seemed surprised she knew. That was when I realized Thanksgiving hadn't suddenly gone wrong. Something had been waiting for me at that table before I ever walked through the door. And if I had never told Vanessa about the property, there was only one question left. How much had my family already found out about me before dinner even started? I stood up before Vanessa could say anything else and carried my glass into the kitchen. Mom followed me almost immediately. "Helen," she said quietly, "please try to be understanding." I turned around. Understanding about what? She lowered her voice, as if Vanessa might somehow be the one who needed protecting. "She's under a lot of pressure." That answer was so familiar, it almost made me laugh. Vanessa was always under pressure. When she went to college, Mom and Dad paid her tuition because they wanted her to focus on succeeding. I worked evenings while attending a cheaper school because Dad said responsibility would make me stronger. When Vanessa got married, they contributed thousands because they wanted her day to be special. When I asked Dad years later for help launching my first small real estate investment, he barely looked at the numbers before shaking his head. "You need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet." So I did. I saved. I borrowed carefully. I worked weekends. I bought a neglected little retail property that everyone else ignored. And I never asked them again. Now Mom stood in front of me acting, as if the independence they had demanded was somehow a betrayal. "What kind of pressure?" I asked. She rubbed her hands together. "One of Vanessa's business investments hasn't worked out the way she expected." That was new. Vanessa complained constantly, but she had never told me she was in serious financial trouble. "How bad?" Mom looked toward the dining room. "Maybe you should just come back and hear her out." I stared at her. This was planned. "No." "Mom." She looked away. My stomach tightened. Before I could press further, Dad walked into the kitchen carrying a thick blue folder. He set it on the counter between us. Maybe this will make things easier to explain. I glanced down. There were loan documents inside, financial projections, property estimates. Then I saw an address printed halfway down the first page. My address. The commercial building Vanessa had mentioned. For one long second, nobody spoke. Then I pulled the folder toward me and opened it. I walked back into the dining room, carrying Vanessa's folder. She saw it in my hands and immediately straightened. "Helen, give me that." I placed it directly beside her Thanksgiving plate. "No, you're going to explain why my property is in your financial documents." Vanessa glanced at Mom and Dad. That tiny movement told me more than any answer could. "It's not what you're making it sound like," she said. "I haven't made it sound like anything. I asked a question." Dad returned to his chair. Mom stayed standing near the doorway. Vanessa exhaled sharply. "My business expansion hit some problems." "What problems?" "Financing problems." She tapped the folder impatiently. "I need stronger collateral for the refinancing package. Your building has enough equity that it could strengthen the application." I stared at her. "So this wasn't just jealousy. You want to use my property as collateral for your business." "I was going to ask you." I opened the folder again. "You researched my property. You estimated its value. You prepared financial documents. You discussed this with Mom and Dad. Which part of that happened after you planned to ask me?" Vanessa's mouth tightened. Mom finally stepped in. "Helen, sisters help each other." I looked at her. "By putting multi-million-dollar assets behind each other's debts." Dad shook his head. "You're making it sound more dangerous than it is. You wouldn't lose anything unless Vanessa couldn't meet her obligations." I almost couldn't believe he'd said it. "That's what collateral means, Dad." Vanessa suddenly shoved her chair backward. "Oh, please, you have $15 million. Her voice filled the room. "You have more money than you could possibly need, and you're acting like helping me would ruin you. Where did you get $15 million? Silence. Vanessa looked away. I waited. "Where did you get that number?" "It doesn't matter." "It matters to me." She folded her arms. "Maybe people notice things, Helen. Maybe you're not as invisible as you think." I closed the folder. "I'm not guaranteeing your refinancing." Vanessa's palm slammed against the table. A glass jumped beside her plate. "Then, what exactly are you going to do with all that money?" Mom whispered her name, but I didn't look away. For once, Vanessa wasn't deciding where this conversation went. I leaned forward slightly. "Before I answer that, tell me who gave you permission to investigate me." Vanessa pushed away from the table. "I don't have to sit here and be accused of something." She grabbed her phone, but I put one finger on the folder. "You brought documents containing my property information into our parents' house. You confronted me about my net worth in the middle of Thanksgiving. You absolutely owe me an explanation." Dad rubbed his forehead. Then he said, "I told her." Vanessa stopped. I turned toward him. "Told her what?" "A few weeks ago, Vanessa asked if I knew anything about your investments. I remembered you mentioning that neighborhood once. That's all." "That was enough," Vanessa muttered. She had searched public property records using the information Dad gave her. From there, she found the commercial building through my company and started researching comparable sales and estimated values. Suddenly, the sequence was obvious. Vanessa's business ran into trouble first. Then she started looking for something valuable enough to rescue it. Then she found my building. And Thanksgiving gave her exactly what she needed: Mom and Dad sitting beside her while she asked me to risk it. "How much?" I asked. Vanessa frowned. "What?" "How large is the refinancing gap?" She hesitated. "About 900,000. Mom immediately stepped forward. "Helen, compared with 15 million, that's..." No. She stopped. She isn't asking me to hand her $900,000. She wants me to put a multi-million-dollar asset behind a business that already has financing problems. Dad sighed. Can we please not make Thanksgiving uglier than necessary? I looked at him. You knew about this before tonight. We knew Vanessa needed help. And you thought the person who should take the risk was me. Nobody answered. Vanessa gave a bitter laugh. That building is just sitting there, Helen. You have all that equity doing nothing when it could save me. That was when everything clicked. She wasn't asking whether I still owned it. She had assumed I did. She had built this entire ambush around that assumption. I reached down and opened my handbag. Mom saw the movement. Whatever you're about to do, she interrupted, remember she's your sister. My fingers closed around the document inside. I kept my hand inside my bag and looked at Mom. She's my sister. That's exactly why she should have come to me and asked. Vanessa scoffed. Oh, stop acting violated. Property records are public. The records aren't the problem. You investigated my finances, estimated what I was worth, prepared paperwork involving my property, and recruited Mom and Dad before saying one word to me. I needed options. You decided I was one of your options. Vanessa's jaw tightened. I pulled my hand from my bag, but I didn't show them the document yet. You want to know whether the 15 million is real. Nobody moved. Yes, Vanessa said. Fine. I sat down. You got part of it right. I've been investing in commercial real estate for years. Dad frowned as if he were trying to reconcile that with the daughter he'd always considered less accomplished. I started small. I bought properties that needed work, improved them, increased occupancy, refinanced when it made sense, and reinvested what I earned. Vanessa crossed her arms. And the building you found became my most valuable investment. Her expression immediately changed. There it was again, that calculation. So you can help me. I almost smiled. You still haven't understood. I slid the document across the table. Vanessa grabbed it first. Her eyes moved over the first page. Then stopped. What is this? A closing confirmation. For what? I held her gaze. You keep talking about my building like you already decided what I should do with it. I tapped the paper. I sold it 2 weeks ago. Vanessa went completely silent. Dad leaned toward her. Mom stared at me. What? Vanessa finally whispered. The sale closed 2 weeks ago. Between that transaction and my other investments, yes, my net worth is approximately $15 million. Vanessa shot to her feet. You sold it. Yes. Without telling anyone. I blinked. Why would I need to tell you? Because I needed that property. The words came out so loudly that even Vanessa seemed startled by them. I leaned back. And suddenly, nobody could pretend this had been about sisterly concern. Vanessa threw the closing document onto the table. You knew I was having problems. I knew you complained about money sometimes. You never told me your business was in danger. That doesn't matter. You sold the one asset that could have fixed this. Your business. Yes. Dad said sharply, Vanessa. But she was already unraveling. I had everything worked out. The building had enough value. Once Helen understood what was happening, I thought she'd agree. You mean once Mom and Dad pressured me? Vanessa's silence answered for her. Mom slowly sat down. Vanessa, was that why you wanted everyone here? Vanessa looked at her. You said yourself Helen would listen if we explained it as a family. That landed hard. I looked at Mom. She couldn't meet my eyes. For my entire life, the pattern had been the same. Vanessa needed something. My parents found a reason she deserved it. I was expected to adjust. Only this time, what they wanted wasn't a bedroom, attention, tuition money, or a holiday plan. It was something I had spent years building. I turned to Dad. You paid Vanessa's college tuition. He said nothing. You helped pay for her wedding. You've helped her financially more than once. Helen, Mom began. I raised my hand. When I asked for help with my first investment, Dad told me I needed to learn independence. Dad stared at the table. So I did. My voice stayed calm. I did exactly what you taught me to do. I became independent. You just never expected independence to mean you couldn't control what I built. Nobody had an answer. Mom finally whispered, families share their success. They can. I looked at Vanessa. When they choose to. Then I looked back at Mom. Sharing is voluntary. Entitlement isn't. Vanessa grabbed the folder. So you're really going to sit on $15 million while my business collapses? No, I'm going to manage my money exactly as I managed it before you discovered it existed. And the $900,000. I'm not giving it to you. Her face hardened. What about guaranteeing the refinancing? No. That was the end of it. Without my former property behind her loan, Vanessa had to negotiate with her lenders herself. Eventually, she sold one of her own investment assets and downsized the business enough to restructure the debt. For once, solving Vanessa's problem required Vanessa to sacrifice something belonging to Vanessa. Things with my parents changed too. I stopped discussing investments with them. When money came up, I ended the conversation. When Mom tried using phrases like asterisk family, helps family asterisk, I reminded her that help required consent. Vanessa and I became distant. She never really accepted that discovering my wealth hadn't given her a claim to it. But I stopped needing her to understand. I invested the proceeds from the sale, according to plans I'd already made long before Thanksgiving. And something else changed with it. For years, part of me had still been waiting for Mom and Dad to look at what I'd accomplished and finally say I had done enough. That Thanksgiving killed the need. Because when they finally saw what I had built, their first instinct wasn't to celebrate me. It was to decide how Vanessa could use it. So I left their house that night knowing exactly where I stood, and for the first time, completely comfortable with it. They spent my whole life teaching me that Vanessa deserved their help, and I should survive on my own. So when she finally discovered what surviving on my own had built, I made sure they understood that my $15 million was never hers to claim.